They say the worst wounds are the ones you can't see. That betrayal is a silent knife. And the closer the hand that holds it, the deeper it cuts. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of how I lost everything, only to take it all back piece by piece, one soul at a time. But this isn't a story about vengeance. Not really. This is about trust, and how it shatters, about love and the lies that live in its shadow. It's about how even the most sacred bonds can be broken, and how, when they are, the pieces don't ever go back the same. I want you to picture this. Me and Derek, my best friend since the 3rd grade. We met on a rainy afternoon in the schoolyard, both of us the last picked for kickball. And maybe that was the beginning of it, the unspoken loyalty of underdogs. We didn't have much back then, but we had each other. And sometimes that was enough. We grew up glued to the hip. First girlfriends, first heartbreaks, first arrests. Yeah, we had our share of stupid. But through it all, he was my brother. Not by blood, but in every way that counted. We had our rituals. Friday night barbecues. Road trips with no destination. Inside jokes that spanned decades. I knew his laugh, his lies, his limits. And he knew mine. I would have taken a bullet for him without blinking. Hell, I thought he'd do the same. So when I met Sarah, when I fell harder and faster than I ever had in my life, introducing her to Derek felt natural. Like finally completing a puzzle I didn't know was missing a piece. They clicked instantly. Same humor. Same taste in music. Same quick wit that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. But I didn't worry. Why would I? He was family. And Sarah. God, she was everything. Smart, stunning, grounded. She had this calm to her that softened every edge in me. For the first time, I pictured a future. A real one. House. Kids. Holidays wrapped in warm lights and laughter. She made me believe I could be more than what I was. The day I married Sarah was the happiest of my life. I meant every word I said at that altar. And when I looked over my shoulder and saw Derek standing there, grinning like a proud older brother, I felt untouchable. Like life had finally aligned the stars in my favor. But the truth is, when something feels too perfect, it probably is. There were signs, sure. But love is loud and doubts are quiet. And I was so busy soaking in the life I thought I had, I didn't hear the whispers. A lingering glance here. A changed tone there. Small things easy to dismiss. And I did. Repeatedly. Because the reality of what it could mean was too painful to face. The cracks were there, forming beneath the surface. Beneath every toast, every shared laugh, every late-night conversation. But denial is a hell of a drug. And by the time I noticed the foundation trembling, it was already crumbling beneath me. That was the beginning of the end. But endings don't arrive all at once. No, they creep in slow, quiet, methodical. And that's how it started. With a look. A silence. A shift so subtle, I almost missed it. It always starts with small things. A comment that doesn't sit right. A look that lingers too long. At first, I thought I was paranoid. Marriage was hard, right? We'd just hit our 2nd anniversary. Long hours at work, bills piling up, that hum of routine setting in. Sarah seemed tired, distant. I chalked it up to the usual growing pains of married life. But then, the small things started becoming patterns. Derek dropping by when I wasn't home. At first it was a joke. You're never around, so I figured I'd keep Sarah company. I laughed. He laughed. Sarah laughed. But it kept happening. Once or twice became weekly. Then more. He started borrowing things without asking. Beer from the fridge. My hoodie. A pair of cufflinks Sarah once gave me. Little things. Things that could be explained. But they left a sour taste in my mouth. Like something was being taken without being said. Sarah changed too. She stopped playing music while cooking. That used to be her thing, singing off-key to old Motown tracks while dancing barefoot in the kitchen. One day, I came home to silence. Just the scrape of her fork against a plate. Her phone started living face down on the counter. Her laugh became thinner. Less spontaneous. It still showed up at dinner parties, in group chats, on Instagram posts. But behind closed doors, it was like watching someone perform joy, rather than feel it. She kissed me goodnight, but I couldn't feel it anymore. I told myself it was stress. That she needed space. That I needed sleep. Anything but what it really was. Because the truth is, when betrayal is creeping in, it doesn't kick the door down. It knocks gently, politely, and waits for you to open it. The moment that changed everything was small, just like the rest. I came home late one Thursday. Client dinner. 2 drinks in. Tired. The lights were on, but the house was too quiet. Not even music playing. That was the first red flag. Sarah always played music while cleaning. Always. I remember the creak of the stairs beneath my feet. The smell of her perfume in the air. Then a sound. A laugh. Not loud. Not guilty. Soft. Intimate. My heart started racing before I even reached the door. I pushed it open. And there they were. Sarah's skin flushed, her hand tangled in Derek's hair. Their bodies still close. Their shock frozen on their faces. I don't remember what I said, because I didn't say anything. I just stood there. Silent. But inside me, something cracked open. Not a scream. Not a fire. Something colder. Something older. Like a wire snapping deep in my chest. And in that silence, I made a decision. They wouldn't get rage. They wouldn't get my heartbreak. That would be too easy. Too human. No, they'd get something much worse. A reckoning. I walked out that night without a word. No confrontation. No scene. But every step I took away from that house, I was building something in my mind. Not revenge. Not yet. First came the grief. Then the numbness. And then the clarity. You don't just lose love and move on. You lose gravity. You start to float through your days untethered, watching the world spin around you like you no longer belong in it. I watched them try to recover. Sarah sent messages. Apologies. Derek pretended nothing happened. Invited me out for drinks like we were still boys, like the betrayal hadn't burned through the bedrock of who we were. But I smiled. I told them I needed space. And while they tried to move forward, I started moving differently. I began watching, planning, calculating, because Derek wasn't just my best friend. He was vulnerable, ambitious, reckless. And Sarah, God help her, still wanted me to forgive her. She left the door cracked open, thinking I'd walk through it. They both underestimated me. They thought betrayal was the end of the story. They didn't realize it was only the end of theirs. Revenge is a cold craft. There's no glory in it, only precision. And I had time and knowledge. After I walked out of that bedroom, something inside me changed. Or maybe it awakened. A part of me that had always been quiet, strategic, observant, patient. The part that watched before it moved. That calculated risk like a language. I didn't scream that night because I knew screaming wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't fix the betrayal. It wouldn't bring back the man I was before I saw them together. But ruin? That I could plan. Derek worked in finance. Hungry, ambitious, reckless. Always had his eyes on the next step, the next deal, the next fast win. His small consulting firm had grown, but not steadily. He operated on thin margins and big risks. He made it look glamorous, but I knew the truth. He was leveraged to the bone. One misstep, and the whole thing would tumble. His lifeline? Gerald Langley. Langley wasn't just his mentor. He was a kingmaker. An old-school magnate who built his empire on loyalty, legacy, and perception. Derek was his golden boy. The heir apparent. Langley trusted him like a son. That was the lever. I just needed the right grip. I started slow. I ran into Langley at a charity gala. One of those overfunded, overcatered events where the rich pretend to care for tax breaks. I made sure our circles overlapped just enough to look organic. Mutual friends. Golf clubs. A whispered introduction at a whiskey tasting. I dropped breadcrumbs. Nothing obvious. I'm thinking of investing. Maybe opening a small advisory wing. I've been watching your firm. Impressive culture you've built. Langley was sharp, but pride has a way of softening suspicion. He liked my demeanor. My story. My restraint. We started talking regularly. Lunches, meetings, a few shared rounds of 18. I let him lead. I let him trust. Meanwhile, I kept Derek and Sarah close enough to observe. I played the wounded friend. The man trying to heal. I responded to Sarah's texts with polite detachment. Replied to Derek's messages just enough to keep him unaware. Occasionally I let them glimpse the old Marcus, laughing, joking, a flicker of hope that maybe time could mend things. That was the point. Hope is a tool when you're wielding silence. Derek started slipping. Missed meetings. Rushed presentations. Sloppy execution. He wasn't sleeping, probably fighting guilt, or maybe just trying to keep up the illusion that everything was fine. I didn't even have to fabricate much. But I helped it along. A few anonymous tips to Langley's office. Nothing too direct. Just enough to plant seeds. Is Derek okay? He seemed distracted at the event last week. Just a heads up, He forwarded a sensitive file to an unsecured address. Small things. Whispered doubts. Then I built the fraud narrative. It wasn't hard. Derek had access to offshore platforms. Legal, technically, but shadowy. I used real files, real client names, and doctored them just enough to look suspect. Redirected a few bank alerts. Created a trail of fabricated emails. One showed a conversation between Derek and a shell company that didn't exist. Another hinted at falsified profits. I made sure the forged evidence matched his style, his typos, his phrasing, even the way he formatted attachments. I knew him that well. The final piece was the dossier. An anonymous report, signed by a third-party forensic auditor. Delivered to Langley's executive assistant in a plain envelope. Inside, offshore transactions, falsified statements, and internal red flags. All pointing to one man, Derek. Langley froze the accounts within 24 hours. And just like that, Derek's world began to collapse. Sarah kept reaching out. Her messages grew longer. More emotional. She said she missed me. That Derek wasn't who she thought he was. That she'd made a mistake. That she wanted to meet. I let her stew. I ghosted her for weeks. Let the silence do what words couldn't. I wanted her to feel the vacuum. Not anger. Not hate. Absence. The absence of the man she betrayed. When I finally agreed to meet, I did it on my terms. She cried. Right there in front of me. Said she'd never stopped loving me. Said the affair was a mistake, one she never stopped regretting. I listened. Quietly. Calmly. I held her hand. Brushed a strand of hair from her face. I said, "It's okay." And then I left. No explanation. Just a single, echoing act of emotional withdrawal. I knew they were breaking, financially, emotionally, relationally. So I waited. And when the time was right, I invited them both to dinner. Not just anywhere. Our place. One of our old haunts. The restaurant we celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, wins. A place soaked in shared memories. I made the reservation. Chose the booth. Ordered their favorite bottle of wine. Set the scene. All that was left was the final movement. The final truth. The restaurant was one of our old haunts. Dim lighting. Low jazz humming through the overhead speakers. Leather booths worn from memory. We used to come here for anniversaries. To celebrate raises, birthdays, milestones. The staff knew our names. Our drinks. Our stories. I arrived early. Wore the suit Sarah once said made me look like a man with secrets. I asked for our usual booth in the corner, half-shadowed, with a clear view of the door. Ordered their favorite bottle of wine. 2 glasses. I didn't plan to drink. I wanted them to feel everything. Sarah arrived first. She looked beautiful, like someone trying not to look like they were falling apart. Hair done meticulously. Makeup hiding the weight behind her eyes. She smiled when she saw me, small, hopeful. The kind of smile you give someone you once knew intimately, but now approach like glass. "Hi," she said, almost in a whisper. I gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, just a second, then obeyed. We made small talk. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth, just not all of it. "Better," I said. "Quieter." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad." But her eyes kept scanning mine, searching for something behind the calm. Then Derek walked in. He looked worse. Like a man aging in fast forward. Thinner, paler. Hair less styled, shirt slightly wrinkled. A shell trying to hold itself together. When his eyes met mine, something inside him flinched. He approached the table cautiously, like it might bite. "Marcus," he said, forcing a smile. "Derek." We clinked glasses. Toasted to nothing. Talked like strangers in familiar skins. The rhythm was off, the notes discordant. But none of them dared address the silence between us. Until I ended it. I pulled out the envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Thick with weight. I slid it across the table, letting the gesture speak first. Derek stared at it, then looked at me. His fingers twitched as he picked it up. Inside, the forged documents. Financial inconsistencies. Embezzlement. Shell accounts. The fabricated paper trail I'd left like breadcrumbs in a trap. Langley's name was CC'd on the final page. Derek read slowly. Then faster. His hands began to shake. His face turned to ash. Sarah leaned in, trying to see. "What is it?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. Derek didn't answer. Just kept reading, flipping through the pages like he could undo them with speed. "What is it?" she asked again, louder. Still no answer. So I gave it to her. "It's the cost of betrayal," I said, my voice calm and quiet. It's what happens when you destroy a man who would have died for you. She blinked. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I could see it in her face, the pieces falling into place. The timeline unraveling in reverse. The moments she thought I was healing, realizing now that I was watching. Planning. I didn't, she started. You did, I said, cutting her off. Both of you did. You made a choice. And now you live with it. Derek looked like he wanted to speak, some desperate mix of apology, excuse, maybe even denial. But I stood up before he could find the words. Don't bother, I said. You were both my family. And now, I looked at them, two ghosts in expensive clothes. You're just lessons. I dropped a $100 bill on the table, turned, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Sarah's voice break into sobs. Heard Derek trying to console her, his voice cracking. I didn't turn around. Not once. Because this wasn't just a confrontation. It was closure. The full circle. The trap snapping shut. Outside, the night air felt colder than I remembered. But in that cold, there was clarity. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt done. Not victorious. Just empty. But sometimes that's all you're left with. Not triumph. Just silence. And in that silence, the slow realization that revenge doesn't rebuild you. It just empties you out differently. Time passed. I heard Derek lost his position. Langley cut all ties. Word spread quietly, whispers of misconduct, mismanagement, something about falsified reports. No charges were filed. But in his world, reputation is everything. And his was ash. He moved out of state. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere forgettable. A name I no longer remember. Sarah tried reaching out, letters, emails, a voice message on my birthday. I never replied. I listened to it once, though. Just once. She sounded tired. Regretful. Like someone trying to gather pieces in hands that no longer worked. She said she missed me. That she never stopped loving me. But love isn't a lifeline when it's tangled in betrayal. It's just another anchor. Sometimes I replay everything. Not the affair. Not even the night I found them. No, what plays the most is the silence in that restaurant. The moment after I walked away. That breath between justice and nothingness. I thought it would feel like a crescendo. A final note in a song I'd orchestrated to perfection. But it didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like a sigh. A long exhale into an empty room. I thought I was taking back control. And maybe in some way I did. But control is cold company. You can't hold it at night. It doesn't laugh at your jokes or sit quietly beside you on the couch. It doesn't replace what was lost. It just reminds you of the cost. I didn't win. I just made sure they lost more than I did. And that's the truth most people don't talk about when it comes to revenge. It doesn't balance the scales. It just breaks them differently. I keep people at a distance now. Friendly, never familiar. I smile, but never too wide. I laugh, but never from the gut. There's always a piece of me clenched in the background, tight, wary, waiting. It's not bitterness. It's survival. Because the part of me that believed in forever died in that bedroom. And the part that was born in its place? He doesn't believe in second chances. He studies everyone's eyes too long. Memorizes their tells. Prepares for exits before entrances. He trusts no one. Some nights, I dream of what could have been. The version of me that never saw the cracks. The life I might have had if things had stayed whole. But those dreams always end the same way. I wake up alone, staring at a ceiling I once shared with someone who wasn't really mine. I don't miss her. I miss the man I was when I believed in her. If you've made it this far, maybe you're thinking I'm the villain. Maybe I am. But villains don't start out that way. They're made. In bedrooms lit by betrayal. In friendships that rot beneath the surface. In moments where silence speaks louder than screams. Villains are just victims with sharper teeth. I didn't ask to be this way. But once you've been cut deep enough, you stop reaching for bandages. You sharpen the blade instead. And if there's one thing you take from all this, let it be this. Be careful who you trust. Because sometimes, the ones closest to you are the ones holding the knife.